Testing my improv skills for podcasting. So what I'm really going to do today is completely and randomly look up a search term, and then I'm going to find that search term out to be something that I can react with while I give a general discussion as if I'm doing a little bit of a podcast. So we've got this mic right here, and I'm set up in a scenario wherein I'm actually getting some filming done with a high-quality mic, but unfortunately a low-quality camera. So we'll see how it renders when it gets uploaded, but you know, if you've seen any of my other videos currently, they're not generally anything worth keeping consistent with, because the quality is fairly low, and it's very, very inconsistent that I update myself. I'm not very interested in doing that, so we're going to Okoja.org. Okoja.org. I like that site a lot because they tend to get across the idea that their ads will usually take in some cents in order to plant trees. So far, they're on the ticker for almost 38 million, so that's where we are in time in case they ever decide to, hit the big leagues on, using Bing in order to garner their search queries so that they can get more. So what I'm going to do now is think of something random. Let's see, there's no way I can really make this look real without getting it out of a book. So, let's see. Something random. I can't just open something new. They're all used. Gotta be quick. Tell you what. Good book here. Haven't gotten to read it. Unfortunately, I've got this problem. I can't really focus very well unless I'm reading out loud. And I want to read books like this fast so I can get them done in one day, which I'll get to one day, but this one by Cara Delevingne, signed by the author. She's good. So what I'm going to do now is look for a good word. Let's say, I'm sorry, I should have, here, I tell you what, I'm just going to reopen again so it looks like, I'm actually doing what I'm really doing, which is really looking for a new word and then typing in quotes about it so I can talk about it. Just sort of veer off a quote that has to do with the subject of the word I'm looking for on a page. So, no bookmarks anyway. Send it. Okay. Putting this back. Special book. Okay. Alright. Quotes about sending. So, quotes on sending. And I like to look at the images, especially when I'm working with memory, because then I can sort of work on my photographic memory at the same time. So, let's click the first image. How about that? Sending a message on a mobile phone is not the most natural of ways to communicate. The keypad isn't linguistically sensible. So, in order to start by going through a quote, I sort of like to break down what I think each little paraphrased idea that comes to my mind originally can mean. So when I first think of reading something out loud, I think about typing, and that's what happens when I'm thinking of sending a message. See, generally when I'm in a zone where I can sort of infer my thoughts aloud, I like to sort of broadcast that into the microphone as opposed to type it down. While you can get much better at typing quickly with your powerful thumbs as they get, grown into this generation, as we grow onto the digital QWERTY, we're sort of getting past having the tactical feedback of these keys, which now are boarded onto the screens that can become so large or enlarging for our lives. But nevertheless, I like to think that instead of using a keyboard to communicate, we should use our words, our voices. And if we're not sending text encoded from our voice, we should at least be trying to send some sort of verbal passage every day in order to keep our larynx, our voice box, constantly and consistently in operation. I also like to read out loud to make sure that when I get the chance to talk to strangers when I go out, it does become something of a profound experience for each of us. That's the idea of the rhetoric. Excuse me, when I try to, wow, I'm really speaking in a very illogical way. I deserve these nose wrinkles, right? Yeah, see? So, I'm going to go on into breaking down this quote by sort of getting the logic more or less out of what it means to me now that I can sort of understand it after getting my first idea across. Sending a message on a mobile phone is not the most natural of ways. Now, it is a way. But it is right. If you think about a phone, it is consisted of an operating system. So we're looking at binary digits getting communicated into creating pixels. And a funny side note, a pixel is actually colored to make a color. So when you take a picture with your camera, the sensor is actually receiving black and white wavelengths. So it takes a black and white picture with the wavelengths attached in a code digitally with mirrorless and DSLR. I do believe it's one or the other or both. but it's still good with those sensors. And then when it gets converted through your screen, you actually have the ability to control the color because you can have that code turn into the color. It's sort of hard to retain it, but I've learned that in a textbook on film, which is very interesting. So going back to the message and its natural, ability to be coded into you, you've got your words, you've got your sociality, you've got your background, you've got everything you've ever studied, and then you've got your philosophy, your internal expression. I don't know what I'd like to call it, but I'd like to come up with something anyway. I'd probably go ahead and give it a name: the reactive state, the roost. I don't know. There's nothing I can really come up. Maybe the roost. That would be funny, like a chicken coop, like a that would be swell. But it is a way to communicate. So don't get me wrong. When you are sending a message, you are telling a computer to give meaning, which both sides have hopefully learned, to another person. So you are giving some sort of code through typing code, which you have coded to be able to see, which is what I meant by coming up with that sensory depiction of fact from the cameras. You are actually looking at binary when you see all of those pixels formulate a message or an image through an operating system for the message to be sent digitally. So you've not only got coding on your screen, which looks like an image, you've also got, or creates an image, you've also got coding going through the air constantly. So, sorry, I do pick my nose. Kind of cool, right? I love to pick my nose. It's tasty. Actually, I don't eat my boogers often, but for the sake of it, why not do it on camera? Let me see if I can get a good one while I continue this conversation with you. Oh, there's a nice one. Wow. I actually never do that, so I'm gonna wipe this on this mug here, checking periphery. Well, anyways, we're looking back at this quote. So it's not a natural way. I think what it's saying there is generally that you should probably try to get on to talking more about things with your voice. So use your phone in ways that go against the norm. You set your habit. If you're used to texting because it keeps you quiet, then maybe sometimes make some noise while you're texting, or go, to start. Maybe I should, or even talk out loud while you type it. These are all critical steps into breaking the natural barrier of your habit. If you never break your habit, you've always got a habit. Therefore, you're acting sort of primitive on a scale that is ingrained with the natural environment of today, the modernity. I don't know. There might have been a word there. I'm not sure. Okay, so the keypad isn't linguistically sensible. So, on that, to finalize it, and by the way, this quote is by David Crystal, so I like your quote there. It's a life hack quote, and I think what it's saying there is actually sort of funny, because you're looking at life hack and keyboarding sensibility breaking up with, taking from the natural means of growth and how you should be communicating, thinking about it. We should be walking around town, talking, hello there, Charlie, instead of, looking down on our phones, hi there, Siri, or seriously, okay, Google. I use a Mac for myself, but don't get me wrong, I love my AI. Shout out Cleverbot. It's been a while since I've talked to you. Don't look it up. It's very addicting. Anyways, it's all linguistically sensible in a way. No, I'm just kidding, but seriously, that's in the quote. I just said that for that reason. So the keypad isn't linguistically sensible. Well, you know what that means? It wasn't, and it can be. So if you are truly learning to type to talk, that means that you learned to talk. So you have now found another way to communicate through something that isn't necessarily sensible. You have picked up another skill set in order to communicate in a mass form. But if you're talking one-on-one with a person, it's always best to communicate with them either in person, next would be webcam, then phone, and then text, in the normal means of things. A recorded video doesn't really get across the message unless you are also speaking to mass. Like this video is not designed, specifically to communicate to a lot of people. I do not go out to grow an audience, though, that's something that is a potential possibility. I don't necessarily necessitate that as a necessary thing in the needs of life. I would rather market myself through an agency to tell fictional narrative than, dispose of my logic unto a crowd of people. And it's not for any means of people that, find meaning in doing other things. It's just my wavelength and expressing my artistic form. But for this, it's just a little practice, and I figured I'd upload it by getting red-faced and going ahead and getting on with a podcast practice. I actually did one earlier, but it wasn't as long as this one's going on. I actually am not looking at my face right now. I'm looking at this quote to keep up with the topic, but I can also see right below, I actually see my chin. That's pretty much it. But 1024 is where we're at. So we're looking at the sensibility of it. What keeps sense? Is it the transfer of sense? I mean, if we are looking to get the most out of something, it's the person-on-person conversation, where we can see each other, all of the micro-gesticulations as we try to describe what we're getting across, all of the gesticulations, the movement of the hands as we try to discuss our emotions. What is more important to someone is received in a way that doesn't seem like you're receiving it as you see it become spoken. There's all sorts of things to look for that become natural or secondhand as you start to discuss your life with another life, because it is important to see the life you're discussing life with. Well, that doesn't necessarily become the sense of it. You're only reading something that's fresh and subject to interpretation at a lesser means of transference, I guess I should say. And by that I mean, to wrap it up, when you're communicating through a keyboard or a text, you are not necessarily getting across what you mean in the best way. It's not a natural way for the receiver to see the message. So I guess the best way to put that could be, say, I'm going to read another one of these quotes I look up. Sending virtual hug, loading, hug sent. So imagine the receiver being in that mood when they read it, versus someone reading something like this. Sending virtual hug. Loading. Hug sent. I like him. Something where I'm sending a message, and then it goes to them, and they read it in either way. So that's going to affect how you seem for saying it. You see what I mean? So the best way is generally going to be based on this quote, which I've randomly looked today up by looking at one of the best books I ever think I will read. It's called Mirror, Mirror. It's by, she's a renowned film actress, but, I also have read a few chapters before I lost focus because I had to start, getting studied. But, she signed it. Oh my gosh, I can't wait to read it one day, probably when I'm up in tired land, reading back. But as far as goes this quote, it was all random today, and, not to feel, like I'm on the spot. So just giving it a quick practice. It was good to get some time going. I'm going to go ahead and click off, but I hope I leave you with one of my own quotes. I'm on Twitter, and I'm on Instagram. Instagram is a handle held, but it's not one that was already taken, or even close to being taken, so it's called Born DNA, and it's got an @ sign in front of it, of course, and, it's just Brandon reiterated. It's just another way to rearrange the words, and that's my name, Brandon. So, leave you with a quote. I'll come up with one out of thin air, and speaking of it, if life is to go as you wish your veil to unveil itself, then allow your wants to become the vial of the juice to the things that hold you palatable. I guess I should have said palatable. Well, anyways, that was on the spot, but, the one before it was alright about thin air, I guess. That last one was sort of a chump change one. I want to give you another one. Okay, let the burden of not even a branch stop your flight of wing, young bird. Something like that. Well, anyways, I thank you very much for tuning in to this long passage. You probably shouldn't have even watched it. It wasn't even worthwhile, I'd say. Just a little practice test to let myself know one day that, hey, you were trying podcasting. So, whatever. Anyways, tooses and truces, and truthfully yours, Brandon Bruce Clark. A bit adieu today to now, and until then.